My name is Jim Downs, and I'm a field specialist in forestry for Ohio State University Extension. Today, I am on the Clark County Fairgrounds to introduce important non-native invasive species. This is Amur honeysuckle, also referred to as a type of bush honeysuckle. There are three very common bush honeysuckles, all of which are non-native and invasive across the state of Ohio. Amur honeysuckle, which is the one that we have here. We also have Tartarian honeysuckle and Moro honeysuckle. Of the three, Amur honeysuckle is going to be the largest specimen. To identify this shrub, we're going to be looking for a shrub that can reach heights of up to 20 foot. Diameters can be very large. This specimen here is one of the largest I've seen in the state, with a diameter of somewhere around 14 to 16 inches. If we look at the base of this, where all of the stems come together, the diameter at the base would probably be closer to 24 inches in diameter. So this is truly a very large specimen. All of the honeysuckles, including this Amur honeysuckle, are going to be oppositely branched. They're going to be simple. They're going to be entire, so no serrations along the edge of the leaf. The leaves of Amur honeysuckle are typically somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 inches in length. And one of the distinct differences between the leaves of Amur honeysuckle versus the other two common honeysuckles is that these tend to be much more sharply pointed, where the other ones tend to be more of a roundish. The twigs themselves are going to be somewhat of a tan and gray, rather smooth. The inside of the twigs are going to be hollow everywhere except for at the nodes. So where the nodes are, or the buds are located, you will see that the stems are not hollow at those locations. As this stem gets larger, it will retain that similar colored bark. However, it will begin to get fairly shredded and can get to be somewhat of a peely nature. So in the late springtime, this will have flowers that are white. The petals will actually be four-lobed. They will turn a yellowish as they mature. These will be very fragrant. Those flowers will end up turning into these reddish colored berries that we see here on this plant. Fruits are readily consumed by wildlife species. However, they are the equivalent of a fast food, so they don't contain the fats and proteins that many of our native berries contain. So essentially they behave more like a high sugary fruit. There are a number of important issues that occur with honeysuckle, which makes them invasive. So not only do they produce large quantities of fruit, which are readily spread by wildlife, they have a tendency of growing in very disturbed areas and can grow in about any situation. While they certainly do best in areas of full sunlight, they can also tolerate shade and grow in those understories of woodlands, as well as develop in right-of-way areas, especially common along the outer belts of some of our largest cities in Ohio, such as Columbus and Cincinnati. You'll see these plants becoming very dominant in the understory of those types of areas. So one of the ecological issues with having bush honeysuckle on your property is that when you have American cardinals that are feeding on bush honeysuckle fruits, they will actually end up producing an average of one fledgling less per nest. So instead of producing 2 to 3 fledglings per nest, they will end up having 1 to 2 fledglings per nest, ultimately lowering their population, and that's because of how unhealthy these fruits are. Another issue with bush honeysuckle is they actually form what is referred to as an ecological trap for songbirds. And so when songbirds are migrating to the north in the early springtime looking for a place to nest, this is one of those plants that does produce leaves very early in the growing season. And so songbirds will see these as a very good place to build their nest because they're one of the greenest places around. However, these plants are often found growing along the edges of fields and forests and in areas where predators are more likely to spend time looking for prey. The other thing that is commonly seen with these bush honeysuckles is that the canopies underneath of these plants tend to be very thin, and so it makes it very easy for predators to be able to spot the nests of songbirds. And so what we see is that if you compare songbird nests in bush honeysuckle compared to songbird nests that are established in our native shrubs, there's a higher rate of predation in those nests that are established in these bush honeysuckles. So there are a number of ecological issues that are associated with bush honeysuckle, besides that which I've mentioned, such as changes in nutrient cycling, changes in water chemistry, and how aquatic life behaves in the water where you have honeysuckle around. Too many, in fact, to try to list in one video, but it is very important where you have bush honeysuckle growing on your property to begin to control those invasives, especially prior to doing any type of canopy disturbance in your forest or within your woodland. For those woodland owners who are very interested in controlling bush honeysuckle on their property, I highly encourage you to check out the Ohio State University Extension fact sheet on controlling bush honeysuckle. One of the ways in which bush honeysuckle gets a competitive advantage over many of the native plants is its length of growing season is greater than that of most of our native plants. So this is a shrub that will produce leaves early in the growing season, much earlier than most of our native plants, and actually will retain its leaves much later into the fall than many of our native plants. So it can easily have an extra month, maybe even 2 months extra of growing time during the year compared to many of our native plants. With that, thank you for watching and have a great day.